Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you Washington, D.C. at the Watergate, and I thought today might be a great time to talk about leadership. Now I'm going to do a whole series of these while I'm in town, and you'll be seeing them over the next couple of weeks, but I wanted to start with the issue of the day, and that is Chairman of the CCP, Xi Jinping in China, is currently in the middle of his party congress that happens every 5 years, and the debate in the China watching world is whether he's going to make himself president for a third term or just dictator for life. Xi Jinping, what he does is kind of besides the point. He already is a dictator for life. So the trappings of how he decides to justify or advertise that are really kind of irrelevant, and it's more important to look at the structure of China at this moment, how he fits into that. China's a tough place to govern. It's a huge country with a massive amount of geographic diversity, and even though the Han supermajority is over 90% of the population, the regions are so distinct that there's a lot of identities even within the ethnicity. North on the Yellow River, you've got the North China Plain, which is where about half the Chinese population lives, and it has always been tight in the grip of Beijing. In the south, you've got the cities from Shanghai going down to Hong Kong, which have always been a little secessionist and more integrated with foreign zones, especially when it comes to their food supply. So they've always had their own identity. And then in the middle, you've got the Yangtze River from Shanghai to Sichuan that has always been the most sophisticated and value-added and functional part of the Chinese economic system. And has usually resisted Beijing's rule, but they're still quintessentially Chinese. Ruling this is difficult because it means each region, each city has its own identity, its own idea of what should happen and not happen, and how to put it all together. And then in Beijing, you've got the emperor who has to manage all of this, and it means that China tends to oscillate wildly between two conflicting visions. On the one hand, there's local autonomy. You've got the locals who are determining what happens. They have a saying in China that the emperor is far away. And so the Chinese system tends to spin apart into dozens of competing systems. On the other hand, you've got the emperor who tries to hold it all together and tends to over-centralize as a result. And combining those two themes means that China has the most war-torn and internecine, conflicting history of all of the major cultures of all the world. Now, in the leadership years before Xi, this is not Mao, but his successor Deng Xiaoping, and moving on from them, there was this idea that there had to be a degree of balance. So leadership involved the south, the central sections, and the north, although the north was very clearly in charge, and the center was very clearly in the second position. But by the time we got to Xi, the decision was made that it's time for somebody who can represent all the regions, and Xi was brought in as kind of a compromise candidate, and then he took over. In his first 5-year terms, it was a massive, what he called an anti-corruption campaign, but it was really a purge of all the competing power centers throughout the party and throughout the system. And whether you had a different view of what China should be or how to get there, you were kicked out. And if you were a local regional power boss, you were brought to heel. In the second 5-year term, Xi went after everyone who agreed with him to make sure that no one was capable of independent thought in his area. And that has made him the most isolated world leader on the stage right now, arguably the most isolated in Chinese history, and he's now more shut off from everything and all sources of information than even the Kim dynasty of North Korea. And so we are seeing catastrophic policy decisions being made in economics and trade with COVID and security. And for the bureaucracy, you kind of go one of two ways. Option number one is you are a true believer, and you think that Xi is the second coming, and so when you see him say something, you snap to and do your interpretation of it in the most zealotous way you can come up with. This is one of the reasons why the lockdowns in places like Hong Kong have gotten so extreme, and why you've got some idiots out there who are sanitizing airport runways because they think that's what Xi wants them to do to fight COVID. But the vast majority of the bureaucracy, knowing that if they get brought to Xi's attention, good or bad, it could be a disaster, they just don't do anything unless they're specifically told. So we're seeing a seizing up through the entire system because we have a leader that is so disconnected from everything. He's making decisions without any information whatsoever because nobody wants to bring it to him. And that means that the Chinese system now, its greatest threat, the greatest threat to the Chinese system, the greatest reason to expect the Chinese system to collapse in the foreseeable future, is the leadership. We think we have a problem in the United States going back and forth from W to Obama to Trump to Biden and all the issues and inconsistencies with that. It's nothing compared to the complete information lockdown that now exists at the very top in the Chinese system. Okay, next time I'm sure we're gonna have to talk about Putin because wow. All right, everyone take care. See you soon. Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from, where am I? Orlando. The big news of this week is that the Biden administration has drastically decreased the level of access that the Chinese semiconductor firms can have to American technology. Now, there's this general belief around the world that China is the world technological superpower and it is able to cut off supplies of pretty much everything to the rest of the world whenever it wants, and that is unmitigated bullshit. There are three types of semiconductors. There's the high end that go into your cell phones, your servers, satellites, power management systems. Those exclusively come from places like Taiwan, Korea, Japan, and the United States. And contrary to, contrary to most people's beliefs, over half of all chips made in the world by value actually originate within the United States. And almost all of the chips that are manufactured in Taiwan are not designed there. They're also designed in the United States. So there's no danger whatsoever in the high end from a embargo sort of situation. Second, you have the mid-range chips that are in aerospace, automotive, and maybe the power control systems for your thermostat and your house. Those are Malaysia and Thailand, and those are also not made in China at all. What is going on with these new restrictions is the Chinese are now no longer able to import any of the chips of those two tiers unless they get a special dispensation. The third type of chips is your Internet of Things, not your smartwatch, your dumb watch, like your little digital Casio watch, if you remember those. This is your digital calculator, perhaps, your smart refrigerator that keeps track of your grocery list, things like that. Those are, yes, almost exclusively made in China. Now, what Biden has done is not just say that the Chinese can't purchase the high and the mid-grade. They're also saying they can't purchase any of the equipment that's necessary to make the high and the mid-grade to make sure that they never move up to that quality step. And there are now increasing steps that the Chinese cannot buy the tools that are necessary to operate what equipment they have for the low grade. And we are very close to the Biden administration saying that the Chinese can't even import the equipment that they need to make the low grade, and they are incapable of making that themselves. It's not like this is a hammer. There's an ecosystem of stuff that is required to build, install, operate, and maintain any of the equipment, even on the low end. And the Chinese cannot do any of it without 100% imported expertise and equipment. That is now what the Biden administration is going after. So where does this take us? Well, assuming we have no interruptions to the supply chains for the materials, that's a different topic. We are looking at China perhaps being melon scooped out of all global semiconductors over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And that's just the start of the Chinese problem, because the Chinese used to import the medium and the high quality products in order to build products and in order to do research. So I'm sure you've all heard about how the Chinese excel at things like hypersonics or artificial intelligence and automation. They do the brain work by using the high-end chips than putting in their own software. If you can't get the high-end chips, then those entire industries shrivel on the vine and go away. So more than anything that has happened in the world at this point, this new step of restrictions threaten to throw the Chinese into a technological winter, and any concerns you have about China in its rise can be killed just by that. And that's before you consider energy or food or political dysfunction, or the Ukraine war, or demographics, all of which are capable of killing China without any help from the others. So, we are now at the end of China's technological rise, and the question now is how fast is the fall? Okay, that's it from me. Until next time.